The galactic survival exam had always been reserved for the elite. It wasn't just a competition, it was a death sentence to most. Only the galaxy's finest dared to step into the fray, knowing that failure wasn't just probable, it was almost guaranteed. Across star systems, civilizations watched with bated breath, eager to witness the ultimate display of strength, cunning, and sheer survival instinct. The exam was broadcast far and wide, a spectacle that brought both awe and fear to anyone who tuned in. Winning meant prestige, and for some species, their entire future depended on it. But this year, something was different. As the gates to the exam world opened, there was a new, unfamiliar contender. Humanity. The Deathworlders. Unbeknownst to the humans, they weren't supposed to be here. Their mission had been simple, a routine exploration, a survival exercise on a hazardous planet in an uncharted sector. They had no idea they had just walked into the galaxy's deadliest competition, one that only the strongest had ever dared to enter. To the humans, it was just another challenge, one they thought they were more than prepared for. As the humans descended onto the planet's surface, their equipment humming with familiarity, alien eyes were watching. Across the galaxy, the elite species gathered in front of their screens, their expressions a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Earth, after all, was the galaxy's dirty secret, a planet that no one took seriously. A death world, yes, but to them, that only meant it was uncontrollable, its inhabitants considered too wild, too undisciplined to ever master their own savage environment. For centuries, humans had been a curiosity, the butt of jokes across star systems. How could such a primitive species, one born from a world of chaos, ever hope to survive in the cold logic of the galaxy? And now, here they were, these so-called Deathworlders, walking into the galactic survival exam as if they belonged. The alien spectators chuckled, shaking their heads. This was going to be a spectacle, all right, but not for the reasons the humans might think. The first task loomed on the horizon, a brutal test of nature's fury. Extreme weather, hostile terrain, predators lurking at every corner. The alien elites, hardened by centuries of technological advancement and military might, struggled to endure these conditions. Their advanced suits malfunctioned under the acidic rain, their sensors going haywire in the face of gravitational storms. For many, this would be the end of their run. They would retreat, barely surviving with their lives intact, and some would perish, their pride shattered in the process. And yet, the humans? They moved through it all without flinching. To them, this was just another day. Earth, after all, was a world where blizzards could strike in the middle of summer, where deserts stretched for miles, swallowing anything unprepared. Their ancestors had survived centuries of harsh climates, wild predators, and unpredictable disasters. The human team barely broke a sweat. With swift precision, they set up shelters, adapted their gear, and navigated the treacherous landscape as if they had done it 100 times before. They didn't even realize this was supposed to be a test. On the alien broadcast channels, silence fell. The amused chuckles stopped. For the first time, the galactic elite looked at each other in confusion, then at the humans on their screens. What was happening? How could a species that was seen as nothing more than wild and unrefined move through this level of challenge with such ease? Surely, they had hidden technologies, some secret method that allowed them to bypass the dangers. But the truth was far simpler than that. The humans were just used to this. This was normal. As they continued their mission, communicating in short, calm bursts, alien viewers watched in growing disbelief. The other contestants, the best of the galaxy, had been struggling, retreating, or worse, perishing in the face of challenges designed to push them beyond their limits. But the humans were breezing through, unaware of the deadly game they were now part of. The sky darkened with ominous clouds as acidic rain began to pour down in sheets, hissing as it touched the ground. The temperature surged from blistering heat to freezing cold in mere minutes, and the wind howled like a beast, cutting through the atmosphere with the force of a storm. This was the first trial of the galactic survival exam, a planet so hostile that only the strongest species dared to step foot on its surface. The weather alone had been engineered to break even the most prepared competitors, forcing them to retreat or perish. The alien teams had trained for this, studied every aspect of the planet's conditions, and brought their finest technology to combat the environment. But even with all that preparation, they struggled. The acidic rain corroded their gear within minutes. Protective suits that had withstood the harshest environments of the galaxy began to weaken under the relentless downpour. The high-gravity storms caused their vehicles to malfunction, and the heat was unbearable, seeping through the cracks in their defenses. It was chaos. One by one, teams of elite species dropped out, unable to cope with the planet's brutal, ever-changing climate. And then, there were the humans. To them, this was just another day in the field. Acidic rain? They had trekked through polluted wastelands on Earth, where chemicals leaked into rivers, poisoning everything they touched. High-gravity storms? That wasn't too far off from the violent tornadoes they had learned to avoid or survive back home. As for the heat, well, deserts had been part of human history for centuries. There was no panic, no sense of overwhelming danger. Just another challenge, another obstacle to overcome. The human team moved quickly, efficiently, and with a sense of calm that was almost unsettling. While the other species struggled to adapt, the humans were already setting up temporary shelters, using the planet's natural resources to craft barriers against the weather. They worked seamlessly, their movements well practiced and coordinated. A few of them exchanged jokes over the comms, laughing about how the heat reminded them of a particularly brutal summer back on Earth. There was no sense of urgency or fear in their voices, only the quiet confidence of those who had faced worse and survived. In the control rooms scattered across the galaxy, where the exam was being broadcast, the spectators watched in silence. The shock was palpable. They had seen species with centuries of experience fall in the face of these challenges, their technology failing, their bodies breaking under the pressure. Yet here were the humans, a species from a death world they had long considered unpredictable and unsophisticated, navigating the trial as if it were routine. At first, the aliens couldn't believe their eyes. Surely the humans were using some form of advanced technology, some secret that allowed them to cheat the system. But no matter how closely they analyzed the footage, they saw nothing out of the ordinary. The humans were simply surviving. They were doing it with their own skills, their own methods, and they were doing it effortlessly. It was as though the planet's deadly environment had no effect on them. This was the kind of situation where the galaxy's finest cracked, where the strongest species faltered, but the humans, these Deathworlders, handled it with ease. Their camaraderie was almost baffling. While other species panicked, fighting for their lives, the humans maintained a light-hearted attitude. One of them made a sarcastic remark about the acidic rain being no worse than the acid spills they'd cleaned up during training. Another joked about building a campfire, despite the toxic conditions. Their sense of humor, their ability to treat this deadly environment as if it were nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle, was something the galactic audience couldn't comprehend. As they worked, it became clear that the humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Their practical survival techniques, honed from generations of enduring Earth's harshest environments, gave them an edge the other species hadn't anticipated. While their competitors were overwhelmed by the sheer force of nature, the humans had already adapted, using the planet's elements to their advantage. They crafted makeshift tools, created protective gear from their surroundings, and worked together in a way that showed their deep understanding of survival. The other species struggled just to stay alive, but the humans had already moved on to the next phase of their mission. And still, they remained completely unaware of the larger game they were part of. To them, this was just another survival drill, another test of their resilience and adaptability. They didn't know that their every move was being watched, dissected, and analyzed by species across the galaxy who couldn't believe what they were seeing. In one of the control rooms, an alien commander stared at the screen, unable to comprehend how these primitive Deathworlders were outpacing his own team, a species known for its advanced technological prowess. "They're not supposed to be this good," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. But the truth was undeniable. The humans were more than just good, they were excelling in ways no one had predicted. The creatures were monstrous, unlike anything seen in most corners of the galaxy. They towered over the competitors, their genetically enhanced bodies rippling with muscle, their teeth and claws glistening in the dim light. These predators had been created for one purpose: to kill. They were the perfect test of survival, and for many of the galaxy's elite, this trial would be their final one. The alien teams were terrified, scrambling to find ways to evade or neutralize the beasts. Their high-tech weapons sputtered and failed against the creatures' thick hides, and panic began to spread as the creatures closed in. But for the humans, this was not an unfamiliar sight. They had seen such predators before, not in this exact form, but close enough. In their eyes, these beasts were no different from the apex predators they had learned to face on Earth. The bears, wolves, and big cats of their homeworld might not have been as large or genetically enhanced, but they were every bit as lethal. The humans didn't see this as a battle of technology or brute strength. This was a hunt, and they knew exactly how to handle it. Moving quickly, the humans communicated with quiet efficiency, setting traps in the terrain and using the environment to their advantage. There was no hesitation in their movements. They had faced worse on Earth, and their instincts were honed from generations of surviving in a world where nature often turned against them. One of them commented on how the alien beasts reminded him of the grizzlies back home, except these beasts were slower. With that, the humans spread out, laying down tripwires and positioning themselves for the inevitable attack. The alien teams, meanwhile, were in disarray. Their weapons proved ineffective, their defensive strategies crumbling in the face of the overwhelming force of the creatures. One by one, they fell, their screams echoing through the arena. The galactic audience watched in horror as the elite species were torn apart, their best warriors eliminated by creatures that had been specifically designed to outmatch them. These beasts were not meant to be tamed, and for most competitors, survival seemed impossible. Then, something remarkable happened. The humans struck back. Using nothing more than their wits and survival experience, they lured the creatures into their traps, neutralizing them with precision. They didn't need advanced weapons or intricate strategies. They relied on the skills that had kept them alive on their own death world for centuries. Where others saw chaos, the humans saw patterns, weaknesses they could exploit. In a matter of minutes, the beasts were incapacitated, and the humans moved on as if nothing had happened. The galactic audience was left in stunned silence. How could this be happening? These creatures had been designed to eliminate the galaxy's strongest competitors, yet here were the humans, treating the deadly beasts like nothing more than a challenge to be overcome. It wasn't just their success that shocked the audience, it was the ease with which they achieved it. The humans hadn't panicked, hadn't hesitated. They had simply assessed the situation, adapted, and neutralized the threat. It was as if they had been prepared for this all along. In the control rooms across the galaxy, experts and commentators scrambled to make sense of what they had just witnessed. For too long, they had dismissed Earth as a chaotic world of little importance, a death world that produced unpredictable and dangerous creatures, but not worthy of serious attention. Now, they were beginning to realize the truth. Earth's environment hadn't weakened humanity, it had made them stronger. The constant presence of danger, the need to adapt to harsh climates, wild animals, and unpredictable disasters had forged a species that could survive against the odds. The realization hit hard. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And this was only the second trial. What else were these Deathworlders capable of? How much had the galaxy underestimated them? For years they had laughed at Earth's chaos, but now it seemed that chaos had bred something far more formidable than they had ever anticipated. As the humans regrouped after the battle, they exchanged casual remarks about the creatures they had just faced. One of them laughed about how the beasts were easier to deal with than a particularly aggressive pack of wolves he had encountered during a training mission back home. Another mentioned how they reminded him of a time he had to fend off a bear while camping. The camaraderie between the team was unmistakable, and the ease with which they handled the situation only served to highlight their natural ability to adapt to danger. To the rest of the galaxy, this was unthinkable. Species that had spent centuries developing the finest technologies and strategies had failed where these humans had succeeded without even breaking a sweat. The audience didn't know what to make of it. They had spent generations believing that Earth was a wild, untamable place, and its inhabitants were just as wild and untamable. But now, it was clear, humanity's wildness wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. In that moment, the galaxy was forced to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about the Deathworlders. They weren't primitive or uncontrollable. They were survivors shaped by a world that had tested them at every turn, and they had become stronger for it. The creatures they had faced in this trial, beasts designed to kill, were no match for humans who had spent their entire existence facing the same kind of threats in their own backyard. The labyrinth stretched endlessly, twisting corridors and disorienting passages that seemed to shift and change with every step. It was a place designed to break minds, to push even the most disciplined species to the edge of madness. The walls whispered, and the ground trembled. Those who entered this maze often emerged shattered, their minds unable to cope with the overwhelming sensory assault and psychological strain. Many didn't emerge at all, succumbing to hallucinations, losing themselves in the labyrinth's shifting geometry. For the galactic elite, this challenge was the ultimate test. Surviving the creatures and elements had been difficult, but this trial targeted something far more fragile: the mind. One by one, the alien teams entered the maze, their faces grim with determination. Their advanced technologies were useless here. The maze disrupted everything, leaving them with nothing but their instincts and wits. And those, they quickly realized, were not enough. The walls seemed to close in on them, the whispers in the air grew louder, and the longer they stayed, the more their minds began to falter. Panic set in, and soon, many of the competitors gave up, desperate to escape before the maze consumed them. But the humans? They walked in as if they were on a Sunday hike. For them, this wasn't the mind-bending nightmare the other species experienced. Earth had prepared them well for unpredictability. Nature, with its dense forests, winding mountain paths, and treacherous landscapes, had taught them to trust their instincts, to remain calm even when everything seemed to be working against them. To navigate a place where direction was lost and nothing made sense. That was just another day in the wilderness for them. The whispers that echoed through the maze didn't unnerve them. They reminded one human of the eerie silence you sometimes encountered in deep woods, where the slightest rustle could set your nerves on edge. The shifting corridors? That was like navigating a dense fog where landmarks disappeared and reappeared without warning. For these humans, this maze was no different from the challenges they had faced in their survival training back home. As they moved through the labyrinth, they maintained a steady pace, working together without hesitation. Their adaptability kicked in as they encountered dead ends and shifting paths, and rather than becoming frustrated or disoriented, they took it in stride. One of them chuckled and remarked how it felt like getting lost in the Rockies during a particularly dense fog. Another likened it to a time he had gotten turned around while hiking a mountain range. These weren't just memories, they were strategies. Earth had been their teacher, and they had learned well. Meanwhile, the alien teams continued to struggle. The maze played tricks on their minds, creating illusions that led them in circles, trapping them in a psychological web they couldn't escape. They panicked, turning on one another, their discipline shattered. They saw threats where none existed, and their senses betrayed them. The labyrinth seemed alive, feeding off their fear, twisting reality until they couldn't tell what was real and what was imagined. But the humans pressed forward, their teamwork unwavering. They communicated calmly, pointing out landmarks and sharing observations to ensure they stayed oriented. Their resilience was on full display as they worked through the puzzle without breaking stride. And where the other species had crumbled, the humans only grew more confident. It wasn't that they didn't feel the maze's effects. It was that they had learned long ago how to manage stress, how to keep moving forward even when the world seemed against them. This maze was just another challenge, one they were fully equipped to face. For the galactic audience, watching from the safety of their control rooms, it was a sight they could hardly believe. The maze had always been a breaking point for even the best of the best. It wasn't just a physical trial, it was a test of mental endurance, something that no amount of technological advancement could help with. And yet, here were the humans, moving through it as though it were just another task on a checklist. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Whispers began to spread. Could it be that the humans, these Deathworlders, were not the weak, uncontrollable species they had always been assumed to be? Earth had long been dismissed as a chaotic world, a place too dangerous to properly explore or settle. But now, it was becoming clear that this chaos had molded a species capable of handling the galaxy's most difficult challenges with relative ease. The maze, which had broken so many before, seemed almost tame in comparison to what these humans had already experienced on their own planet. As they neared the end of the labyrinth, the humans still showed no signs of the mental exhaustion that had claimed the other competitors. There was no sign of the cracks that had begun to appear in the minds of the galaxy's elite. If anything, the humans seemed invigorated, as though the maze had been a welcome challenge rather than a nightmarish test of endurance. The final few twists and turns of the labyrinth fell behind them, and the humans emerged, blinking in the light, completely unaware of the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. To them, it had been a puzzle, a task to be solved, nothing more. But to the galaxy, it was a revelation. These Deathworlders, who had been underestimated for so long, had not only survived the maze, they had mastered it. Experts across the galaxy scrambled to explain what had just happened. How could humans, a species from a world so wild and untamed, outperform the most advanced species in the galaxy in a challenge that was designed to test the mind? The answers were slowly beginning to form. Earth's environment, which had been seen as a curse, was now being recognized for what it truly was, a crucible, one that had forged humanity into something far more formidable than anyone had realized. The final challenge had arrived. The remaining species were dropped onto a hostile world, its surface a wasteland of jagged cliffs, volcanic craters, and toxic swamps. The rules were simple: survive. It was a battle royale, no alliances, no mercy. Only one species would emerge victorious. For the galactic elite, this was the ultimate test, the point where centuries of evolution, technology, and cunning were put to the test. But the humans, still unaware they were part of a galactic competition, simply treated it as another mission. They hit the ground running, assessing their surroundings, taking stock of the resources available, and formulating a plan. To them, this wasn't a fight for survival in the way the other species saw it. It was just another drill. Years of military strategy, survival training, and harsh Earth environments had prepared them for scenarios like this. They didn't see it as extraordinary, just a situation to be handled with discipline and efficiency. One of them joked that it felt like survival camp, and the others laughed. To the humans, this was still a mission, one they were going to complete. The other species were not so fortunate. As they scrambled to outmaneuver one another, the humans observed them from a distance, noting weaknesses, patterns in their movements. There was no rush to engage. Patience was key, something the other species, in their desperation to survive, had forgotten. One by one, the competitors began to fall. Some were eliminated by the environment itself, unable to cope with the planet's hostile conditions. Others turned on each other, desperation driving them to make fatal mistakes. Meanwhile, the humans kept their focus. They moved in small teams, using the terrain to their advantage, setting traps, and isolating the remaining competitors. When they finally engaged, it was swift and decisive. They didn't need flashy technology or brute force. Their strength lay in their coordination, their ability to adapt, and their understanding of survival at its most fundamental level. The other species were outmatched, and they didn't even realize it until it was too late. As the last alien competitor fell, silence settled over the battlefield. The humans stood, looking around, as if waiting for the next task. There had been no celebration, no dramatic declaration of victory. To them, this was just another day's work, another mission completed. They exchanged glances, wondering when the next phase of their survival exercise would begin. But then, something unexpected happened. The sky darkened, and the ground trembled as a massive holographic figure appeared above them. It was one of the alien overlords, the architects of the galactic survival exam. The humans watched, confused but alert, as the figure began to speak. "Congratulations!" the voice boomed, echoing across the wasteland. "You have completed the galactic survival exam, a test that has claimed the lives of the galaxy's finest for centuries. You humans have triumphed where others have failed. And now you will learn the truth. The humans exchanged puzzled looks. Galactic survival exam? What was this alien talking about? They had no idea they had been competing, no idea that the trials they had faced were meant to test the very limits of their species. But the Overlord wasn't finished. Earth, your home, has long been classified as the ultimate death world. For millennia, it has been known as a place where life itself is a struggle, where only the most resilient survive. But we, like many others, underestimated the true potential of its inhabitants. We assumed that your world's chaos was a sign of weakness. We were wrong. The humans remained silent, absorbing the weight of what was being revealed. Earth, a death world. It made sense now. Their home had always been unforgiving, its environments brutal, its creatures deadly. But to them, it had never been anything but home. They had grown up in it, thrived in it, learned how to endure in ways no other species could. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand. You have proven, the Overlord continued, that Earth's harshness has shaped you into something extraordinary. Where others faltered, you persevered. Where the finest species crumbled, you stood tall. You are no longer the outliers, the unpredictable Deathworlders. You are survivors of the highest order, and the galaxy will never look at you the same again. As the hologram faded, the humans were left standing in the aftermath of their victory. For a moment, they were silent, processing the revelation. They hadn't just survived, they had won. A competition they hadn't even known they were part of. But instead of celebrating or reveling in their triumph, they shrugged it off. To them, it wasn't about being the best in the galaxy. It was just another mission, another survival scenario that they had completed successfully. One of them finally broke the silence with a chuckle. Guess that was more than just a drill, huh? The others laughed, their camaraderie intact, as if the galaxy's acknowledgement of their strength was just another piece of trivia. There was no need for validation. They didn't need to prove anything to themselves. They knew who they were. They had faced Earth's wildest challenges, had grown up in a world that tested them every day, and had come out stronger for it. The galaxy, however, would never be the same. The myth of humanity, the unpredictable Deathworlders, had been shattered. They were no longer a species to be ignored or mocked. The humans had unknowingly dominated the galactic survival exam, and the rest of the galaxy stood in stunned awe. Species across the stars would now have to reconsider their place in the hierarchy. Earth, the death world that had long been dismissed as chaotic and dangerous, had produced something the galaxy had never seen before: true survivors.